Okay, y'all. Sit down. Grab something to drink. Because the man who told the world he was the biggest boss you've ever seen just got caught doing the one thing a boss is never supposed to do. Rick Ross, the same self-proclaimed emperor who once flexed private jets, 300-acre mansions, and 9-figure net worth claims, was spotted sweating in a commercial airport terminal like he was trying to disappear into the carpet. And that photo alone tanked 20 years of a carefully painted empire. But sis, that airport pic is not even the wildest part. What people uncovered afterward is the reason his entire boss image is collapsing in slow motion right in front of everybody. And after tonight, you are never going to look at Rick Ross the same way again. Because what I'm about to walk you through is not a rumor. It is not a hater talking. It is a full, receipts-in-hand breakdown of how the loudest self-proclaimed hustler in hip-hop went from the untouchable Teflon Don of Miami to the punchline of every timeline in America. Watches getting called fake on camera. Jewelers laughing at his diamonds. Rappers dragging him about a 2-bedroom apartment. Tour dates going on buy one get one. And a personal jet story so shady the internet refused to let it go. If you thought Rick Ross was still that guy, honey, buckle up. Because tonight, we are getting into every single receipt. Now, before we go any further, I need y'all to understand what Rick Ross used to represent. Because you cannot appreciate a fall if you never respected the height. And at his peak, this man was not just a rapper. He was a mood. He was the walking definition of luxury rap. That deep growl. That hun. Those Maybach ad-libs. That thick chain swinging like it was heavier than everybody else's rent. When the boss pulled up, the room folded. Clubs stopped. Cameras turned. And every hustler in the parking lot pretended they had that same lifestyle at home. He built an image so massive that even skeptics started buying into it. He was the guy sitting in the pool, in the sunglasses, telling you that the closest you would ever get to that life was pressing play on his album. And people did. Album after album, deal after deal, the Miami mogul made you feel like every check he signed was 10 times bigger than yours. He talked about 25 ventures. He talked about Dubai on Monday, Canada on Friday. He walked around telling anybody with a microphone that his net worth was 9 figures. And for a long time, nobody had the guts to ask him to prove it. Then 2026 happened. And everything Rick Ross spent 2 decades constructing started leaking oil in public. Because here is what people are finally realizing. The Rick Ross story was never really about the music. It was about the myth. And when the myth started cracking, the music could not carry the weight by itself. Fans went from calling him the boss to calling him the actor. Critics went from admiring the empire to counting the missing pieces of it. And this new generation of hip-hop watchers, the ones who fact-check everything on their phones in real time, they turned the boss into a full-time investigation. Let's start with the moment the internet officially decided this man was not who he said he was. Because it was not one big scandal. It was a dozen little ones stacked on top of each other, and each one chipped a little more paint off that Maybach-colored image. First, there was the watch situation. Now, Rick Ross has been wearing jewelry on camera for almost 20 years. He has flexed on stages, on yachts, on private planes, on Instagram lives. He has done photo shoots looking directly into the camera with pieces the average person could not afford in 3 lifetimes. So imagine the moment a well-known jeweler goes on camera, looks at one of his watches, and casually says, on the record, that the piece is not real. Not that it is possibly fake. Not that it might be replicated. Straight up, that watch was only produced twice in the entire world, in 2 specific sizes, and both original owners are known. And Rosie, honey, is not one of them. Y'all know that clip hit the timeline like a grenade. The man who spent his whole career selling luxury got publicly accused of wearing decoration. And instead of clapping back with a receipt, instead of showing paperwork, instead of showing the box, he laughed it off, threw on another chain, and kept posting. Which, to a lot of viewers, felt like admitting the accusation without saying a single word. Then came the jet moment. Baby, the jet moment. This one is going to live forever. Because for years, Rosé has told anyone who will listen that he flies private. He said he waited 20 years to charter a jet because he wanted to buy his own. He posted the plane. He named the plane. He showed the branding on the plane. He gave interviews about the plane the way most people talk about their firstborn child. And then, in 2025, fans caught Rick Ross sitting at a commercial gate at a regular airport, in regular seating, with regular passengers, looking, according to a whole lot of viewers, like a man who did not want to be recognized. Now, let me be very clear. There is nothing wrong with flying commercial. Nothing. Beyoncé has flown commercial. Jay-Z has flown commercial. Rich people fly commercial every single day. That was never the problem. The problem was the way the boss reacted. Because instead of saying, yeah, I fly however I want to fly, mind your business, he came out with a full explanation. He said his jet was in the shop. He said it was getting new Starlink internet installed. He said it was a $500,000 Wi-Fi upgrade. He said he chose to fly commercial to Colombia to party with a friend. He said he did not want anybody looking down on regular hustlers who ride bicycles to get to their money. He said all of that. And the internet, God bless it, said, "Sir, we did not ask you all of this." Because the more he explained, the more people felt like something was not adding up. If the jet was really in the shop, why was there no photo of it in the shop? If the upgrade was really about internet, why not push the trip? If nothing was wrong, why did the explanation sound like a hostage statement? He even got clowned mid-flight in an old clip of himself pretending he could see a fighter jet outside the window during a commercial flight, and the whole timeline turned into one giant meme factory. He was no longer the boss. He became the joke of the week. But sis, the joke of the week eventually turned into the storyline of the year. And that is where the Drake situation blew everything else out of the water. Now, for a very long time, Rick Ross and Drake were close. Not just cool. Not just business partners. Actual family in the hip-hop sense. The Miami boss opened doors for Drake back when Drake was still building his name. They made songs together that critics still call classics. Aston Martin music. Stay Schemin'. Diced Pineapples. Money in the Grave. Those were not one-off features. Those were two artists standing in each other's corner across an entire decade. And Rose used to talk about Drake like a little brother he loved. He used to say the love between them was genuine. He used to say he did not want to see Drake lose. Then Drake and Future had that public falling out. Then Metro Boomin stepped in with Future. And then Rick Ross made a choice. He picked a side. He picked the side that was not Drake's. And once Drake dropped Push UPS, once that line about a certain Ricky landed, once Drake started subtweeting an entire era of MMG in the same breath, the boss said, bet. And what came next was Champagne Moments. Now, Champagne Moments was not just a diss track. Champagne Moments was Rick Ross emptying the entire safe. He went at Drake's family, Drake's business, Drake's body, Drake's history, Drake's identity. He said things that permanently changed how people looked at the friendship. And for about a week, he was winning. Timeline was on his side. Streams were up. Memes were flowing. Then Kendrick Lamar entered the chat. And when Kendrick finished, the whole battlefield looked different. Because now Drake was no longer everybody's problem. Now the boss was standing in the middle of a war he did not necessarily win, holding a diss track that no longer felt like the biggest thing in the room. And here is the part that made people uncomfortable. Rick Ross did not stop. Weeks passed. Months passed. Drake had moved on. Kendrick had moved on. The culture had moved on. But Rose kept talking. He kept posting. He kept giving interview after interview about Drake. He made jokes about Drake's plane being old. He made jokes about Drake's height, Drake's voice, Drake's fanbase, Drake's engineers, Drake's albums. He even said his DJ should never play Drake's vocals on Aston Martin music again. He said Drake was washed. He said Drake's projects were trash. He said Drake was 2 years too late. And viewers started asking the one question he clearly did not want asked. If you really won, why are you still talking? Because in hip-hop, the man who won never has to remind you. The man who won drops the next album, buys the next building, and lets the silence do the talking. But Rose was refusing to let it die. And that alone flipped the narrative. Suddenly, the boss looked bothered. Suddenly, the untouchable one looked obsessed. Suddenly, the man who used to say he was too rich to argue was sounding exactly like the person he claimed to be above. Even Fat Joe, one of the most diplomatic voices in hip-hop, sat next to Jadakiss and openly said he did not understand why the beef with Drake was still going on. When Fat Joe is confused, honey, the culture is confused. And that is when 50 Cent walked back onto the field. Now, if there is one man who has been waiting for the boss to slip up in public, one man who has kept the file open for over 15 years, one man who has never, not once, given him a break, it is Curtis James Jackson. And 50 Cent looked at all of this like a shark looking at a bleeding fish. 50 Cent said Rose does not own his masters. 50 Cent said his rival has been saved by every big name he ever worked with. 50 Cent said Eminem saved him. 50 Cent said Dre saved him. 50 Cent said the only real hustle Rose ever had was talking about hustling. And then 50 Cent pulled out the receipt that broke the internet in half. 50 Cent said Rick Ross lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. That is what he said. On camera. In front of everyone. About a man who spent 20 years selling the world a mansion fantasy. Now, the Miami boss has never publicly confirmed or denied that specific claim in a way that shut it down. And 50 Cent, being 50 Cent, kept feeding the internet. Every day. Every week. Photoshops. Memes. Podcast clips. Instagram reels. He turned his rival into content, and the content never stopped uploading. But even 50 Cent's shots are not the deepest cut. Because the deepest cut is one Rick Ross has been carrying since the beginning of his career. And it is the one topic he cannot outspend, outflex, or outrap. Officer Ricky. Y'all knew we were getting here. Because before Rick Ross was Rick Ross, William Leonard Roberts too was working as a corrections officer at the South Florida Reception Center in Dade County. Public records confirmed it. Employment paperwork confirmed it. Photos in the uniform surfaced online, and eventually, the rapper himself sat in front of a camera and admitted he had worked in that job. He said it was only for a few months. He said he was late a lot. He said he never really made it fully into the prison. But the paperwork was the paperwork. And in the world he rapped about, in the world he built his entire persona around, that job title was the one detail that could never be smoothed over. 50 Cent took that receipt in 2008 and turned it into a full-scale campaign. He released Officer Ricky. He released cartoons. He released skits. He kept the story alive year after year. And even when the noise died down, the label never fully came off. Every few months, someone new picks it up. A rapper. A blogger. A podcast host. A comedian. And Rose has to answer it all over again. The problem is not that the man once had a normal job. Millions of people work in law enforcement. That is not the crime. The problem is that he built his entire empire on a story that was the opposite of that job, and then, when the truth surfaced, he tried to deny it before finally accepting it. That single moment created a permanent crack in the credibility. And because the crack was never fully sealed, every controversy that came after it slipped right through the same opening. Even the name itself, Rick Ross, created controversy. Because the real Freeway Rick Ross, the actual former kingpin whose story inspired the stage name, sat in prison watching another man rap under his identity. When Freeway got out in 2009, he filed a $10 million lawsuit. The battle stretched 4 years. In 2014, the courts ruled in favor of the rapper, citing artistic expression protections. Legally, it was a win. Culturally, plenty of people never accepted it. Because in the culture, borrowing a real hustler's name and selling that borrowed identity as your own is a debt that never fully closes, even when the judge says it does. And speaking of identity, we have to talk about the UOENO situation. Because this was the moment the Miami mogul temporarily lost his corporate footing. He had a guest verse on Rocco's song, and one specific line touched on a subject so serious that advocacy groups mobilized within days. Reebok, who had a full endorsement deal with him, cut ties. The apology came, but it came late. And in a career full of controversies, that one was the moment sponsors started counting. Now, here is where the whole picture starts making a different kind of sense. Rick Ross has always been two things at once. On one hand, he is a genuinely successful businessman. That part is not fiction. He has real estate holdings. He has more than 25 Wingstop franchises across the Southeast. He owns Checkers and Rally's locations. He has beverage partnerships with Luke Belair and Bumba Rum. He has invested in health-related ventures. He wrote books. He founded Maybach Music Group and put Meek Mill, Whale, French Montana, and Omarion on. That side is real. That side is documented. That side deserves respect. But on the other hand, he has always sold a version of himself that is bigger, richer, deadlier, and more untouchable than any Wingstop portfolio can back up. And the second the world started auditing the difference between the two, everything got shaky. Because the audience of 2026 is not the audience of 2006. The audience of 2006 believed you when you said your chain cost $500,000. The audience of 2026 asks for the receipt, the box, the serial number, and the wire transfer. The audience of 2006 clapped when you said you had a private jet. The audience of 2026 sees you at the gate at MIA and posts the video before you finish boarding. The audience of 2006 rewarded the fantasy. The audience of 2026 punishes the exaggeration. And Rosie, unfortunately, built his entire brand on the fantasy. So every time the fantasy meets the internet, the fantasy loses. Let's talk about the tour situation. Because this one hurt too. His 20th anniversary Port of Miami tour was supposed to be a victory lap. It was supposed to be the moment where the boss reminded America that he was one of the last true kings standing. Instead, reports emerged that ticket sales were slower than expected in multiple markets. Promotional buy one get one offers appeared on certain shows. And once Drake caught wind of it, Drake responded in his own way online, adding one more layer to the ongoing rivalry. Now, buy one get one is not the end of a career. Plenty of major artists have adjusted ticket strategies. But when you are the man who spent your entire career saying you were the biggest boss in the room, the buy one get one headline hits differently. Because it undercuts the exact story you have been selling for 20 years. And here is where it gets darker. There is a rising theory across hip-hop media that the Miami mogul is going through what a lot of former titans go through when the culture shifts under their feet. Not a financial collapse. Not a career ending. Something more subtle. A slow erosion of respect. And in hip-hop, respect is currency stronger than money. A rapper with respect and no money still eats. A rapper with money and no respect gets clowned every single day, no matter how many chains he wears. The scary part is that Rosé seems fully aware of this. Because look at the pattern. Every controversy is answered publicly. Every diss is answered publicly. Every joke is answered publicly. Every rumor is answered publicly. He does not let anything slide anymore. And a man who does not let anything slide is a man who feels like he has something to prove. Which is the exact opposite of the boss persona that made him famous in the first place. The old Ross would have shrugged, laughed, and dropped an album. The new Ross responds to comment sections. That shift is what fans are really reacting to. Not the airport. Not the watch. Not the two-bedroom joke. Not the Drake beef. Those are just symptoms. The real story is a persona that no longer matches the person, and an internet that refuses to look away until the two line up. Now, I want to be fair here, because there is another side to this story, and it deserves airtime. Rick Ross would tell you that everything about his life is exactly what he says it is. He would point to the 300-acre estate. He would point to the Wingstop empire. He would point to the 12 albums, the platinum plaques, the sold-out shows he has done historically, the roster of artists he has developed, the brand deals he still commands, the plane he says is being upgraded, the businesses he says are still expanding. He would tell you that the reason people are attacking him is because he is winning, not because he is losing. And honestly, sis, there is a version of this story where that is true. There is a version where every haterade take on the timeline is just the price of being famous for 20 years. But even in the most generous version of this story, one thing is undeniable. The way the boss is being talked about in 2026 is not the way he was talked about in 2010. The reverence is gone. The mystery is gone. The untouchable aura is gone. And in an industry built on aura, that shift is louder than any diss track, any lawsuit, and any Wingstop. Now, let me tell you where I stand. Because y'all always ask me and I always tell you. I think Rick Ross is not broke. I do not believe that narrative. I think the man has real money, real businesses, and a real portfolio. But I also think he is standing at the most dangerous point in a rap veteran's career. He is at the point where the mythology and the man have to become the same person, or the crowd is going to keep pulling the mask off until there is nothing left underneath. And right now, Rose is fighting to keep the mask on when the smartest move would be to take it off, own everything about his story, own the airport, own the corrections gig, own the borrowed name, own the two-bedroom joke, own all of it, and turn it into the most powerful comeback narrative in hip-hop. Because the only thing more magnetic than a boss who never falls is a boss who falls and stands back up in front of everybody. But that requires humility. And humility is the one drip the boss has never been photographed wearing. So here we are. 12 albums in. 20 years deep. Businesses everywhere. Chains still swinging. Growl still growling. Ad-libs still hitting. And a public reputation quietly bleeding out on the timeline while the same man keeps posting like nothing is happening. It is one of the strangest fall-off arcs the culture has watched in real time. Not a collapse. Not a bankruptcy. Not a scandal. Just a slow, steady leak that only stops the second the man in the middle of it decides to stop patching it with press runs and starts patching it with silence. And here is the meta question I want y'all to sit with. If Rick Ross had never said a single word about Drake, if he had never posted a single reaction video to 50 Cent, if he had never explained the jet, never explained the watch, never explained the airport, never explained the corrections officer job, would any of this be a story right now? Or is the real reason he is trending in 2026 because he himself will not stop feeding the algorithm the exact drama he is trying to escape? Because sometimes the loudest defense is the biggest confession. And sometimes the man who keeps explaining is the man everyone stops believing. Rick Ross is a legend. That is not up for debate. He is a mogul. That is not up for debate. He is a real rap voice from a real era, and his catalog will outlive every single joke on the timeline. That is not up for debate either. But Rose the myth and Rose the man are not the same person anymore, and until he decides which one he wants to be in public, the internet is going to keep dragging both. So tell me, y'all. Where do you stand? Is the boss being unfairly hunted by an internet that refuses to let a hip-hop legend age with dignity? Or is he the one holding the microphone that keeps announcing his own downfall? Because from where I am sitting, the receipts do not fully match the fantasy anymore, and the fantasy is the entire product. Drop your take in the comments right now. Do not be shy. Tell me if you think Rick Ross damaged his own legacy or if you think the culture owes him more grace than he is currently getting. Tell me if you think the jet was really in the shop or if you think that story was written by a very brave publicist. Tell me if you think 50 Cent has a point or if you think 50 Cent has been recycling the same joke since Obama's first term. Tell me if you think Drake and the boss will ever squash it or if you think that friendship is buried under a lifetime of subtweets. And tell me, sis, if you think there is another artist right now who is quietly heading down the same path Rose is walking. Because if you thought the Miami mogul was the only one the internet has receipts on, honey, wait until you see the next name we pulled a file on. That story is worse. That story has bodies. And when you see who I am covering next, you are going to understand why 2026 is the year every big rap name is finally being audited in public. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you are new. Share this with a friend who still thinks every rich rapper on Instagram actually owns everything they are standing next to. And most importantly, drop that comment. Because the timeline is loud, but y'all are always louder. I will see you in the next one. And trust me, the next one is going to be even bigger.